It was just past midnight when I first remembered the trail. The forest had a kind of patience that night, stretching shadows between the trees like thin fingers brushing against the cold ground. Fog curled around the roots, and somewhere in the distance, water hummed softly, as if it were breathing. My lantern flickered, struggling against the darkness, each sputter sending long, twisted shadows across the trail. The air smelled faintly of damp pine and earth, almost sweet, almost alive. I thought I was alone. I thought I had left the world behind. But then there was a pause, a silence, so complete it pressed against my chest like a hand. And in that stillness, I heard a whisper, or maybe it was my own voice echoing. Something moved, far too deliberate to be a trick of the wind. My breath caught in my throat. That's when I saw it. The lantern swings gently, its pale light stretching across the forest floor. Fog curls around the trunks, thick and unrelenting, hiding the path ahead. Every step I take feels smaller than the one before, swallowed by mist. I hear it first as a whisper. Not close, not far, somewhere between the trees. It could be the wind, but it feels deliberate, watching, waiting. Branches reach across the trail like crooked fingers. I brush one aside and catch the smell of damp earth, cold and raw. Somewhere behind me, I sense a presence, always just out of sight. The lantern's glow bounces off the fog, haloing shadows that bend unnaturally. I stop. A leaf skitters across the trail. But I didn't move it. Silence presses in, heavy, expectant. My breath puffs in little clouds, fading immediately. The whispers come again, closer this time, curling around my ears. I strain to hear words that aren't quite there. A shadow flickers near the edge of the light. It isn't solid. It doesn't behave like anything natural. I step forward. My foot falls uneven against the soft earth. Every sound multiplies, echoes that shouldn't exist. The fog seems to thicken, swallowing the lantern's glow, as though the trees themselves are drawing nearer. I try to focus on the trail, but the path twists. I can't remember the last bend, the last tree, the last thing that felt safe. And yet I keep moving. Something shifts behind me. A soft brushing, like fingertips against my shoulder. I whirl around. Nothing, just fog, but the feeling lingers, crawling along my spine. The whispers rise again, rhythmic now, almost like breathing. They mimic the cadence of my heartbeat. I can almost make out syllables, fragment of a name, a warning, or a promise. The lantern swings too fast, light flickering against a mist. Shadows grow longer, stretching toward me like fingers reaching for warmth. I step backward. A sudden hush. The forest holds its breath. Every sound, my breath, my steps, the distant creak of a tree, is sharp against the silence. And then, just beyond the glow, I see it. A flicker, like another lantern, but smaller, distant, moving against the fog. It hovers, almost curious, watching me. I want to follow it, but my legs feel rooted. The trail behind me already seems lost, erased by the fog. I take a shaky breath. The whispers fall into a low hum, vibrating through the mist, through my bones. I tell myself it's nothing, just the forest, just fog, just imagination. But I know better. The lantern swings again. A shadow shifts, and I keep walking. The fog clings tighter here, threading between trees like cold fingers. Every step I take seems smaller, more careful, as if the earth itself might notice. Leaves crunch softly underfoot. Then silence. I stop, wait, and then another crunch. It mirrors my step. I glance over my shoulder. Nothing. A shadow flickers between the trees, vanishing before I can focus. The rhythm of the forest changes, slow, deliberate, matching mine exactly. The air smells damp, mossy, like it has been holding secrets for decades. A faint breeze lifts a curl of fog, brushing my face. The shadow appears again, just at the edge of my vision, shifting with my movements. I quicken my pace. So does it. The footsteps behind me echo every step. Not ahead, not somewhere else. Exactly behind. I want to turn. I tell myself it's the wind or an animal, but there's nothing there. Nothing except the fog and the echoes of my own movement. Branches scrape my arms, leaving cold trails. I hear a distant snap, then silence, then the soft hum of unseen energy vibrating through the trees. Every shadow bends strangely, like the light itself doesn't belong. I pause at a fallen log. The footsteps halt too. A quiet anticipation hangs in the air, thick and unyielding. Then they start again, closer this time. I try to call out, but my voice barely reaches past my lips. A dry rustle answers me. I can't tell if it's wind or if something else is moving just beyond the lantern's glow. My heart beats unevenly. Each thump echoes through the fog. It seems to measure my fear. It seems to follow me. I take another step. The shadow darts again. But when I stare directly, it's gone. Only the fog remains. Pale, unbroken, indifferent. I notice the ground beneath me. Every leaf, every stone, every twisted root looks slightly wrong, out of place, like the forest has shifted while I wasn't looking. The footsteps persist, soft now, teasing. Not heavy, not threatening, just present. I can almost sense a shape just beyond the lantern's reach. Watching, learning, waiting. I move faster. The echo matches me perfectly, just a whisper behind. I can feel its gaze, unseen on my back. Every nerve alive, every sense tingling. The lantern swings wildly. Fog curls tighter around the trunks. Shadows stretch unnaturally, and I realize the path I thought I knew is gone. I stop. The footsteps stop. Silence, thick and suffocating. And then a faint exhale like someone breathing right behind me. I turn slowly. Nothing. Just fog. Just shadows. But the rhythm remains. The echo of my steps. And I keep walking. The fog thins slightly as I entered a small clearing. Moonlight fractured through branches, but the shadows clung stubbornly to the ground. At the center, a massive tree stood alone. Hollow. Empty. Waiting. Its bark was dark, gnarled, scarred with age. A low hum pulsed from within, soft but insistent, vibrating to the soles of my feet. I crouched closer, drawn by curiosity I couldn't name. Inside the hollow, faint whispers teased my ears. I couldn't make out words, just fragments, sighs, murmurs that sounded familiar and alien all at once. The air smelled faintly of damp wood, of something ancient, untouched. I pressed my hand against the trunk. The hum responded, rising slightly, almost like a heartbeat. My fingers tingled, a warmth crawling slowly up my arm. Shadows inside the hollow twisted with the faint light, moving as though alive. I leaned closer, straining to see shapes, to understand the source of the vibration. The whispers seemed to breathe with the wind, yet no wind stirred as a shiver ran down my spine. The forest around me fell into silence, waiting. Every leaf, every branch, every distant bird seemed to pause, attentive that I stepped closer still, and the hum deepened. It resonated against the hollow walls, against my chest, against my teeth. For a moment, I felt as if the tree itself was observing me, curious about my presence. I crouched, peering into the darkness. Faint voices floated up, mingling with the hum, speaking in a rhythm I could almost follow. Names, laughter, warnings, promises. They were just beyond understanding that a sudden rustle of leaves startled me. I froze. Nothing emerged, just a faint, imperceptible movement of air. Yet the hum persisted, steady and slow, drawing me in. I placed my ear against the bark. The whisper swirled around me, tickling my mind, brushing against memories I didn't know I had. The clearing felt impossibly quiet now, as though the rest of the forest had vanished. A shadow moved inside the hollow. I blinked. It was gone, but the vibration lingered, pulsing in the air and the wood in me. The fog shifted at the edges of the clearing. I felt exposed, like stepping too close to something that had been waiting. Yet I could not tear myself away, not from the hum, not from the voices that beckoned silently. I stepped back. The hollow remained patient. The whispers softened, retreating into the depths of the tree. But the memory of their presence lingered on my skin, cold and vibrating. I breathed in the damp, earthy air. The clearing felt impossibly still, yet alive. I took a final glance at the hollow tree before moving on. And even as I walked, The hum echoed faintly behind me, soft, persistent, as if the forest itself remembered my touch. The trail narrowed again, fog pressing in from every side. Branches arched overhead, forming dark corridors that shivered with every faint breeze. The forest felt alive, watching. A crackle of static broke the quiet, not from any device, but from the air itself. It vibrated through the mist, brushing against my ears, making my skin crawl. I stopped. The static lingered, rising and falling, like a pulse I couldn't escape. Every other sound warped around it. The crunch of leaves, the snap of a twig, even my own breath. I raised the lantern. Its pale glow flickered against the fog, revealing shadows that didn't belong. They stretched, bending toward me, then vanished the moment I looked directly. Something shifted just beyond the light's reach. A figure? Or just another trick of the fog? I couldn't tell, but my chest tightened. The air smelled of damp earth, wet pine, and something faintly metallic. It clung to me, mixing with the static, with the sensation that I was not alone. Soft footsteps echoed, but not in rhythm with mine. They paused when I paused, resumed when I did. I whispered my own name into the fog. No answer came, only the crackling, undulating static. It seemed almost conscious, bending the space around it, warping reality just enough to unsettle. I tried to move forward. The trail seemed longer, stretched unnaturally, curling into the shadows. Branches scraped against my arms as if resisting me, and the static followed, a low, persistent hum pressing against my mind. I sensed something shift behind me, a silhouette, a flicker, something that belonged neither to shadow nor tree. It stayed just out of sight, patient, waiting. I focused on the trail ahead, but the lantern's glow barely penetrated the fog. Every step was a negotiation with the unseen, a delicate dance where one misstep could reveal I didn't know what. The static rose again, louder this time. It seemed to move through the fog itself, twisting, curling, filling the space around me. I felt a pulse in my chest, matching its rhythm, syncing me with the forest's own unnatural beat. A sudden hush fell. The static vanished as quickly as it appeared. Silence pressed down, heavy, expectant. I could hear my own breathing, loud and shallow, reverberating through the mist. And then, just for a moment, I caught movement. A pale shape shifting beyond the lantern's glow. Not human, not fully shadow. It vanished before I could decide what it was. I exhaled slowly, the forest seeming to release me, though I knew it had not truly let go. The path continued, winding deeper into the fog, and I walked on, each step measured, aware, knowing that something was always just beyond the light. The trail opened into a small clearing. Mist drifted low across the ground, curling around roots and rocks like fingers. A faint glow shimmered ahead. A campfire, pale, almost blue, burning without smoke. Its light barely reached the edges of clearing, leaving the trees dark and watching. I stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into damp earth. Ashes stirred as if moved by invisible hands. A soft, hollow sound, like the whisper of old wood, rose from the circle. I held my lantern higher, trying to see beyond the glow. A figure sat by the fire, still, silent, watching. It made no movement, no sound, but I felt its gaze pressing against my skin, cold and patient. I wanted to speak, but my voice faltered, caught in the fog-thickened air. The figure remained, immobile, an anchor in the eerie light. The smell of the fire was faint, smokeless, unnatural. It reminded me of dry leaves and something metallic, something old. The clearing hummed softly, the whisper of the woods blending with the crackle-less flames. I circled the fire slowly. Each step stirred faint echoes, tiny noises that seemed too precise to be accidental. The figure didn't flinch, didn't blink. It existed outside of time, a stillness so complete it pressed against my thoughts. Shadows stretched outward from the campfire, reaching into the mist. They curled and shifted, bending in ways the light could not touch. I caught glimpses of movement there, pale and fleeting. The trees leaned in closer, as if drawn to the fire's glow. I knelt by the edge of the circle. The ashes shifted again, like something had been stirred just beneath the surface. A faint breath brushed against my neck, soft, deliberate, invisible. I shivered, wishing for the comfort of distance, but unable to leave. The figure's gaze seemed to follow my every movement, though I could see nothing but a shadowy silhouette. The clearing felt impossibly large, yet claustrophobic. Every step I took seemed to echo in a space that shouldn't exist. I listened. The hum of the forest was almost gone, replaced by a subtle vibration in the air. The fog thickened, rolling into the clearing in slow waves. The fire remained pale and steady, refusing to succumb to the mist. I wanted to look away. I wanted to escape. But something held me there, drawn to the pale light, to the silent figure, to the unnatural hush of the woods. Finally, I took a step back. The figure did not move. The fire continued to glow, casting long, twisting shadows. The clearing seemed endless, and yet I knew I would eventually have to leave. I walked on, every footfall careful, aware. The pale campfire lingered behind me, and I could feel its gaze on my back long after I had gone. The trail narrowed again, winding between jagged rocks that rose like silent sentinels. Fog drifted low, threading through crevices, curling around moss-covered stone. Each step felt smaller, cautious, as if the earth itself were watching. Then I heard them, whispers, soft and deliberate, carried through the rocks. They spoke my name. I froze. The sound seemed to vibrate through the stone itself, brushing against my skin. Cold seeped from the crevices, pressing into my bones. I stepped closer, drawn despite the chill. The voices rose slightly, harmonizing, shifting in tone. They weren't loud, but they filled every space around me. The rocks trembled under my fingertips, almost imperceptibly, as if breathing. A low vibration pulsed through the ground, syncing with the rhythm of the whispers. I leaned my ear to the stone face. Faint syllables brushed against my mind, secrets I could almost grasp, then lose. The fog thickened around me, curling higher into the rock crevices, hiding shapes I could not name. The air smelled of damp stone and pine, mixed with a faint metallic tang. It clung to me, wrapping around my legs, my arms, my neck. The whispers swirled, overlapping, speaking in voices that were not quite human. A shadow passed between the rocks. I blinked, gone, yet the vibration lingered, a presence that existed beyond sight. I stepped forward, every footfall echoing softly in the hollow spaces between stones. The whispers responded, rising and falling, teasing, coaxing. It was impossible to tell whether they were ahead or behind, or simply everywhere. I brushed my hand along a rock surface. It shifted subtly, smooth where it should have been rough, hollow where it should have been solid. I drew back instinctively, heart quickening, aware that I was trespassing into something ancient. The voices softened, murmuring just beyond comprehension. They knew me. They knew things I had not spoken aloud. I shivered, drawn in and repelled at once. I dared to move on, careful, slow. Every step stirred echoes, and the rocks seemed to lean inward, listening. The fog rolled with me, a living thing, a guide I could not trust. Finally, the whispers faded into the distance, leaving only the faint hum of the rocks beneath my fingers. The forest beyond seemed impossibly still, yet I felt their gaze linger, heavy and unseen. I exhaled, the cold air biting my lungs. The path stretched forward, uncertain, and I walked on, knowing that the rocks would remember my presence long after I had passed. The trail led me to a broken bridge. A small stream ran beneath it, fog curling over the water like soft fingers. The wood groaned faintly under my weight, though the wind was still. Shadows twisted along the water, impossible shapes that shifted with the lantern's glow. I stopped, breath shallow, listening to the gentle ripple of the stream. It seemed ordinary at first, then not. Something moved beneath the bridge. Not water, not stone. Something that watched. Patient, unseen. I leaned closer, peering into the darkness. The stream reflected the pale light, bending into strange angles, hiding forms that did not belong. A sense of being observed pressed against my spine. The air smelled damp and cold, earthy with a faint tang of moss. The fog carried it, curling around my face, brushing my neck. Every movement of the water seemed deliberate, as if the stream itself was aware. I stepped onto the bridge, planks creaking softly beneath me, shadows pulled beneath, stretching and shrinking in impossible ways. I blinked, and a shape darted just beyond the lantern's reach. The silence was thick, broken only by the soft gurgle of the water. I could feel the presence beneath me, something patient, waiting, knowing. It did not move like an animal, not like a human, not like anything I had seen before. I lowered my lantern toward the water. A pale shimmer appeared between the ripples, a flicker of light that seemed alive. It vanished when I focused directly, leaving only darkness and reflection. The bridge seemed longer than it should have been, stretching unnaturally into fog. Each step echoed, mirrored by something unseen beneath the water. I tried to listen, but only the stream's whisper answered me. A sudden rustle came from the far side. Not leaves, not branches. Something larger. I froze. The shadows below twisted in response, bending against the pale light. I felt my chest tighten, heart beating a slow, cautious rhythm. The fog thickened at the edges, curling around the bridge like a living thing. And still, beneath, something watched. I exhaled slowly, careful not to startle what I could not see. The lantern's glow trembled with each breath. I moved forward, one step at a time, aware that the shadows on the bridge were not mine, aware that they followed, patient, silent, always beneath. Finally, I reached solid ground. The stream flowed quietly beside me, indifferent, but I could feel the gaze lingering, even as the forest swallowed the bridge behind me. The trail curved through a dense stand of pines. Their needles trembled slightly, though the air was still. A low hum pulsed through the forest, vibrating softly underfoot, under skin. I stopped. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, threading through the trunks, curling around branches, brushing my ears. Pale light flickered between the trees, moving without pattern. Not the lantern, not fire, just a quiet, drifting glow. It shifted, lingering on shadows, illuminating shapes that shouldn't exist. The air smelled of resin and damp earth, mixed with the faintest tang of something metallic. The hum pressed against my chest, steady, insistent, almost comforting, almost. Yet every instinct told me it wasn't safe. I stepped forward, careful. Needles crunched softly beneath my boots, echoing in the thick, vibrating air. The light moved with me, pausing, then disappearing into the fog-dense trees. Branches brushed against my face, leaving cold trails across my skin. I glanced at the trunks. Shadows bent unnaturally, stretching at impossible angles. I blinked. They returned to normal. Almost. The hum deepened, a low resonance threading through the ground. I crouched, listening, as if the forest itself were trying to speak. Words formed in a vibration, but they were elusive, slipping through understanding. A pale shimmer floated past my vision. I turned slowly. Nothing. Then it appeared again, hovering between branches, deliberate, slow, watching. The feeling of being observed tightened around me, a coiling presence in pines. I breathed carefully. The fog rose at my ankles, curling around roots and fallen branches. The humming pines seemed to sway in sync with my heartbeat. I could feel in my chest a resonance I could not shake. I stepped closer to the source of the light. The air seemed to thicken, pulsing with the hum. Shadows twisted, dancing without wind, bending towards something I couldn't name. A sudden pause in the hum made me shiver. The forest held its breath. Leaves trembled, needles quivered. The fog stilled. Then the pale light flickered once, twice, and vanished. The hum continued softly, insistent, as though reminding me it had not left. I felt a presence just beyond reach, patient, curious, alive. I moved on slowly, each step measured. The trail led deeper, yet I could still feel the glow brushing my skin, the hum vibrating beneath me. The pines whispered secrets I could almost understand, and I walked on, drawn into the mystery, aware that the forest had not finished observing me. Morning fog lay thick across the forest floor. The trail beneath my feet was softened, blurred, like the earth itself had forgotten where it led. Each breath hung in the air, cold and damp, curling around my neck. I noticed them first. Footprints. Not mine. Not fully formed, yet undeniable. They appeared in the mist as though pressed into the earth moment ago. Each step ahead revealed more. They led deeper into the unknown, vanishing and reappearing in impossible patterns. I hesitated, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from the fog. The air smelled of wet leaves, cold soil, and something faintly metallic, lingering in the mist. I followed cautiously. Each footfall echoed softly, swallowed almost immediately. The silence around me was thick, alive, and impatient. Shadows moved at the edges of the fog. I could sense them, bending unnaturally, twisting just beyond the lantern's reach. Every rustle of leaves or snapping twig felt amplified, deliberate, as if meant to guide or warn. I crouched to inspect a footprint. It was pale in the mist, pressing deep into soft earth. Too perfect, too deliberate. I shivered, feeling watched, and my reflection in a small puddle shimmered strangely, distorted by the fog. Soft whispers drifted from the tree-line. Not words, just sounds, fragments I could almost understand. They pressed against my ears, my mind, wrapping around the rhythm of my heartbeat. I took another step. The footprints matched, perfectly aligned with mine. Not before, not after, but exactly as I moved. A shiver ran through me. The forest pulsed with awareness, a patient, quiet presence. The fog shifted around the trees, curling higher, hiding the trail ahead. I felt exposed, yet drawn forward by the footprints' persistence. They led me further, deeper into the mist that seemed to breathe around me. I glanced behind. No footprints, only a vague disturbance of fog, as if something unseen had walked beside me. My breath caught, every nerve alive. The trail stretched onward, uncertain, erased and rewritten by the fog. Yet I moved forward, step by careful step. The forest watched, silent, patient, and I walked on, knowing that the mist itself remembered each footfall I made. The fog thickened, clinging to the trees like cold silk. I moved slowly, boots sinking into wet earth, every step tentative. The forest seemed impossibly still, holding its breath. Then I saw them, a pair of glowing eyes, peering from behind a tree. They didn't blink. They didn't move. Yet I felt their gaze pierce through the fog, through the lantern's pale light, straight into me. I froze. The air smelled of damp wood and something metallic, sharp and faint. My breath hung in clouds, trembling against the chill. I took a careful step forward. The eyes vanished. A heartbeat later, another pair appeared, higher, lower, somewhere else. Each blink of my lantern revealed a new set, and each time I looked directly, they were gone. Shadows stretched unnaturally between the trees, bending toward the light, twisting at impossible angles. I could sense movement just beyond the glow, soft rustles, careful, deliberate. The forest seemed alive. Branches arched closer, needles brushing my face, fog curling at my ankles. Every sound, my boots, my breath, the whisper leaves, felt amplified, measured. I whispered a name. The eyes responded, not in words, but in presence, shifting, blinking, disappearing. A cold thrill ran along my spine. I could feel them everywhere, patient, curious, waiting. I tried to follow the gaze, but the fog swallowed every detail, every shadow, every trail of movement. I realized I was no longer walking toward something. I was walking into it. A low rustle came from behind me. I spun. Nothing. Just fog. Just trees. And the lingering impression of eyes. The forest pulsed with quiet awareness. I could feel in the soil, in the roots, in the fog itself. The eyes had not disappeared. They were patient, hidden, always just beyond sight. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold mist fill my lungs. The trail stretched on, uncertain, and I walked forward, every step measured, careful, knowing the eyes in the darkness were never truly gone. The trail opened into a small clearing. Moonlight spilled across soft earth, illuminating an empty swing hanging from a crooked tree. No wind stirred, yet it rocked gently back and forth, creaking with the rhythm of a heartbeat. I stepped closer, boots pressing into damp soil. The fog curled around the swing, coiling at my ankles, brushing my knees. Every movement felt amplified, measured, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. The creak of the swing pulsed through the clearing. Each rise and fall matched a quiet pulse in my chest. I held my lantern higher, light trembling against the mist. A shadow shifted behind me. I spun. Nothing. Only the trees and the fog and the faint, persistent movement of the swing. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold metal sharp against my skin. Soft rustles echoed in the clearing, deliberate, unseen, like footsteps that weren't mine. I could feel something tracing my path, patient, silent, always just beyond reach. I crouched, peering at the swing. Its chains gleamed faintly in the lantern light, moving without wind, without force. It felt alive. Something unseen pushing, pulling, waiting for me to notice. I whispered a question into the fog. No answer, only the creak of the swing and the soft brushing of shadows along the edges of light. The clearing seemed impossibly still, yet alert. A faint rustle behind a tree caught my attention. I turned slowly. Nothing moved. The swing continued, rocking, as if measuring my hesitation. I took a careful step forward. It moved faster. I froze. The chains creaked in response to my heartbeat. The fog thickened, curling around my boots, rising to brush my legs. I could feel the forest gaze on my back, patient, calculating. Every nerve in my body tingled with awareness. I stepped back. The swing slowed. The clearing exhaled quietly, releasing a tension I didn't fully understand. I moved on slowly, careful not to disturb the rhythm. The swing continued to rock gently, a pale, creaking heartbeat in the middle of the night, and I walked forward, aware that something unseen traced each step I took. The fog thickened around me, curling between the trees and settling on my shoulders. Each step I took sank slightly into the damp earth, careful, deliberate. The forest seemed to breathe in rhythm with my own pulse. Then it came, a sudden brush of cold along my neck. Not wind, not mist, something unseen, deliberate, brushing just beneath my hairline. I froze. The lantern trembled in my hand, casting quivering shadows along the fog trail. Every branch, every leaf, seemed to bend closer, leaning in as if to watch. Whispers rose, curling softly around the fog. Soft promises, half-formed, half-understood. I shivered, the words brushing my mind, pressing against thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. The fog twisted around me, thickening at my feet, rising slowly like it had intent. Every rustle felt alive, deliberate, as though the forest itself were moving toward me. I exhaled slowly, tasting the damp earth and cold metal tang in the air. My own heartbeat sounded loud in the stillness. A shadow flickered at the edge of the lantern's glow, bending unnaturally, retreating when I focused on it. I stepped forward cautiously. The cold brush returned, lighter now, teasing, almost patient. The whispers followed, curling around my ears, breathing against the fog. Branches scraped my arms as I moved, soft and precise, like fingertips along skin. I could feel the forest coiling closer, pressing in, aware of every step. The path ahead seemed to twist subtly, changing with each glance. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was a fog, the night, my imagination, but the chill persisted, lingering, brushing again against my neck. Soft, deliberate, unseen. The fog swirled, forming shapes I could almost recognize. Faces? Shadows? Or simply tricks of the dim lantern light? I couldn't tell, and I didn't want to. Finally, I moved on, each step careful, quiet, measured. The cold lingered in memory. The whispers curled in my mind, and I walked through the fog, knowing the forest was awake, and that something unseen still followed. The fog thickened to a near-solid wall around me. The trail I had been following vanished, swallowed entirely by mist. Familiar trees twisted into shapes I did not recognize, trunks curling unnaturally, roots clawing at the earth. I stepped forward cautiously, each footfall soft, measured. The forest seemed alive, reshaping itself with every breath I took. Branches reached toward me, brushing my arms with cold, damp fingers. The air smelled of wet earth and moss, metallic faintly, like iron left in the rain. Every step made the fog curl differently, as if it were aware of me, watching, waiting. I reached for the lantern, but its glow barely penetrated the mist. Shadows stretched along the ground, bending and twisting as though the light had a mind of its own. I blinked, and the trail shifted again. A soft whisper of movement passed behind me. I turned. Nothing. Only the fog, curling higher, reshaping the space I thought I knew. The forest seemed to pulse with a quiet awareness. Trees leaned subtly inward, their leaves trembling as if whispering secrets to one another. I could feel the earth itself moving beneath my boots, guiding me deeper. The fog shifted again. Familiar markers were gone. Rocks, roots, even the shape of the ground seemed altered. The path was no longer a path. It was something else. Something alive. I hesitated, the sense of being observed coiling tighter around my chest. Soft rustles echoed in the mist, deliberate and slow. Something lingered just beyond the lantern's reach, patient, aware, watching. I exhaled slowly, fog curling around my breath. Each step forward felt like stepping into a space that was no longer mine. The trees whispered, the ground hummed, the mist pulsed, and I walked on, uncertain where I had been, uncertain if I would ever leave. The trail had vanished. The forest had shifted, and I was alone, still moving, still watched, drawn forward by something I could not name. The fog parted slightly, revealing a small, still pool nestled between gnarled roots. Its surface shimmered pale and cold, untouched by wind or ripple. I crouched, lantern light trembling over the water. My reflection stared back, but it moved independently. Not exactly me, not quite right. I leaned closer, eyes fixed. The water rippled faintly, though the air was still. Shadows bent across the surface, stretching and twisting in impossible ways. The forest around me exhaled softly, mist curling higher into the trees. I could hear the faintest whispers, almost beneath my own heartbeat, brushing my ears. The reflection shifted again, tilting its head, watching me with something inhuman. I reached a trembling hand toward the water. The surface shimmered and pulled away, distorting into shapes I could not name. A faint hum vibrated underfoot, threading through the mist and into my chest. The air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like forgotten tools in the rain. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching toward the pool, toward me, curling in the pale lantern light. I could feel a presence behind me, patient and quiet, waiting for me to turn. I dared not. The reflection moved again, lips twitching, eyes unblinking. It mimicked me in some ways, but it was deliberate in others. A smirk I hadn't made, a glance I had not given. I whispered my own name. The water shivered, rippling with the sound. The reflection's gaze followed me, slow, deliberate, unyielding. Branches scraped the ground, leaves shivered in the fog, and I realized the forest was leaning inward, pressing closer, watching. The pool remained still beneath my hand, teasing with glimpses of what should not exist. I took a step back, heart hammering softly. The reflection lingered, unmoving, the water trembling faintly in its own rhythm, and I felt that I was not alone. The trail stretched onward, fog curling in its wake. I rose slowly, leaving the pool behind. Its gaze followed me, silent and patient, and I walked forward, knowing that somewhere in the water, something moved with me, something I could never leave behind. The trail wound through a stand of old trees. Leaves rustled softly, not with wind, but with rhythm. A faint pattern, like a lullaby, brushed against my ears, curling around the fog. I paused. The notes were quiet, almost imperceptible, yet they carried emotion, sadness, longing, something older than memory itself. The fog drifted low, curling around roots and rocks, brushing my ankles. I stepped carefully, listening, feeling the vibration in my chest. The forest seemed to breathe along with the lullaby. Shadows stretched along the trunks, bending slowly in the pale lantern light. I could sense movement at the edges of my vision, deliberate, patient. A presence lingered, unseen, coaxing me forward with a melody. The air smelled of damp leaves and pine, faintly sweet, almost like forgotten perfume. Each step forward deepened the rhythm of the song, threading it into my mind. I could almost hum along, though I knew it would be wrong. Branches brushed my face, fingertips of cold and rough bark. The lullaby continued, curling around my head, my arms wrapping me in invisible hands. It was soothing, yet eerie, drawing me closer to something I could not see. I glanced behind. Mist swirled, but no shape followed. Yet the feeling of being observed pressed against my back, subtle and insistent. I crouched near a fallen log, listening. The leaves trembled, the rhythm shifting, pulsing to the forest floor. The song carried voices I could almost understand, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I exhaled slowly, the fog curling around my breath. The forest seemed impossibly quiet now, yet alive, attentive, aware. The lullaby softened, fading as I moved, but leaving its trace along my skin, my mind, my heartbeat. I rose carefully, walking forward, each step measured. The trail twisted ahead, deeper into the mist. The leaves whispered. The forest watched, and I walked on, drawn by the lullaby, aware that the unseen presence followed, patient, quiet, always just beyond the fog. The fog thinned just enough to reveal a cabin ahead. Its walls were dark, weathered, untouched by time, yet somehow familiar. The trail led me closer, each step careful, hesitant. The door creaked open, slow and deliberate, though no wind stirred. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood and dust, untouched by years. Light from my lantern trembled along the walls, casting long, restless shadows. Old belongings lay scattered, frozen in time. A chair tipped slightly. A kettle rested on the hearth, dust dancing in the pale glow. Everything felt ordinary, yet impossibly wrong. Shadows flitted across the windows, subtle, almost teasing. I blinked. Gone. The silence pressed close, heavy, patient, as though the cabin itself were aware. I stepped inside, boots soft against the worn floorboards. The air seemed colder here, pressing against my chest, curling around my arms. Every creak of the floor echoed like a heartbeat. I leaned toward the windows. Fog pressed against the glass outside, thick and alive, twisting in slow spirals. Shadows moved just beyond the frame, bending the pale light into shapes I could not name. The smell of wood and dust mixed with something metallic, faint, lingering. I breathed slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet hum that seemed to pulse through the cabin walls. It was alive, aware of me, patient, watching. I traced a finger along the edge of a table, though it shivered beneath my touch, faintly, like a memory stirring. The room felt impossibly still, yet restless, as if it remembered every step I had taken before. A soft creak came from above. I froze. Nothing moved. The cabin exhaled quietly, releasing tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I stepped back toward the door. The fog outside swirled, thick and patient, waiting. Shadows lingered in the corners of the cabin, subtle, teasing, impossible to fully see. I walked on, lantern held high, each step careful, aware, the cabin fading behind me into mist. Its presence lingered in memory, and I knew the forest had not yet finished with me. The clearing widened, fog curling low along the edges of the trees. Shadows pulled against trunks, bending in ways that made my eyes ache. And then I saw them, figures, still, motionless, standing at the very edge of the clearing, just beyond the lantern's glow. I blinked. They did not move. They did not breathe. Yet I could feel their gaze pressing against me, heavy and patient. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves, cold earth, and something metallic lingering beneath. Soft rustles of movement reached my ears, too subtle, deliberate, like a heartbeat mirrored in the fog. The figures did not shift, yet I sensed they were aware, alive in ways I could not comprehend. I stepped closer. They vanished. Just like that. One blink, one hesitant movement, and the clearing was empty. A low hum filled the space they had occupied. I turned slowly, scanning the edges, seeing only fog curling around trees, shadows bending toward some unseen point. The forest seemed to lean inward, holding its breath. Leaves whispered softly, a melody of warning and invitation, brushing my ears. Every instinct screamed caution, yet I felt drawn toward where the figures had been. I took a careful step forward. The fog shifted. Another figure appeared, distant, half-formed, as if made of mist and shadow. It lingered patiently, watching, waiting. I whispered, my voice swallowed immediately by the thick air. No answer came. The figure did not move. It existed outside time, a presence that could vanish and return at will. I stepped back slowly. The clearing exhaled quietly, releasing tension that had gripped my chest. The figures faded entirely, leaving only faint impressions in the fog, soft vibrations in the ground beneath my boots. I moved on, careful, measured, aware. The forest pressed close, shadows stretching, and I walked forward, knowing the figures waited always at the edges, patient and silent, even when I could no longer see them. The trail curved toward a stream, fog curling low over stones slick with moisture. Water flowed quietly, but not naturally. Its movement carried a soft cadence, a murmur threading through the mist. I stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The gurgle of the water formed words, faint and deliberate, not language I understood, but meaning brushed against my mind, curling in whispers I could almost grasp. I shivered. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. The air smelled of cold water, wet moss, and something metallic beneath it all. Fog clung to my skin, curling around my ankles, brushing my face. Every step I took echoed softly, swallowed by the whispering current. I knelt at the edge of the stream. The words became clearer, though still impossible to fully understand. Secrets, warnings, promises, flowing, rising with the gentle rhythm of the water. The stream glimmered faintly in my lantern's pale glow. Shadows twisted along the banks, stretching toward the water, then retreating when I looked directly. I felt their gaze, patient, deliberate, and alive. I exhaled slowly. The water pulsed softly, a vibration underfoot, threading to the fog and into my chest. I could feel it pulling at my attention, drawing me closer to what I was not meant to see. A rustle behind me made me freeze. I turned, catching only the soft swirl of mist. The whispers continued, curling around my mind, brushing against thoughts I had not spoken aloud. I placed my hand near the water. A chill rose instantly, sliding along my fingers, crawling up my arm. The stream flowed past, murmuring, alive, aware. I stood slowly, hesitant to leave, but drawn forward by the trail. The fog thickened behind me, and the whispers followed, trailing softly through the forest, always patient, always knowing, and I walked on, feeling the stream's secret presence lingering, a quiet memory brushing against my mind long after I'd passed. The trail wound higher, mist curling between the trunks of ancient trees. Needles shivered faintly, brushing my cheeks and arms with soft, cold trails. A pale flicker appeared between the branches, drifting without purpose yet deliberate in its pace. I froze, watching. The light moved slowly, almost lazily, but I could feel its awareness. It paused, then continued, vanishing whenever I focused on it directly. The forest smelled damp and earthy, with hints of pine and cold stone. Fog pressed against my boots, winding around roots and fallen branches. Every rustle of leaves felt amplified, deliberate, measured. I stepped closer, careful, lantern shaking softly in my hand. The flicker moved with me, always just beyond the edges of light, teasing, patient. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the ground, bending toward the glow, then retreating. A low hum vibrated through the trees. The needles trembled as though alive, reacting to the pale light. I realized the forest itself was attentive, watching, waiting. I whispered my own name. No answer, only the flicker drifting, patient, unhurried, tracing a path I could not follow. Branches brushed my face as if guiding me, curling gently, insistently. I blinked. The light vanished, yet I felt its presence lingering, pulsing softly, weaving through the mist and shadows. I moved on slowly, step by step, aware of every sound, every movement in the fog. The flicker reappeared briefly between branches, then disappeared again. It was neither threat nor comfort, only observation, quiet and deliberate. The trail stretched forward, twisting deeper into the forest. Needles trembled, shadows shifted, the fog followed, and I walked on, drawn by curiosity, held by unease, knowing the pale light flickered somewhere just beyond sight, patient, silent, watching as I passed. The trail stretched before me, empty and silent, No rustle of leaves, no movement of animals, only the soft crunch of my boots against damp earth. Fog hung low, curling around roots, around rocks, around me. The air smelled of cold soil and pine, faintly metallic, pressing against my senses. Every step echoed softly, swallowed immediately by the mist. I was aware of nothing but my own breath, loud in the quiet. Shadows leaned along the trees, bending subtly, twisting with shapes that felt alive. I could sense movement at the edges of my vision, fleeting, deliberate, patient. Nothing appeared, and yet the feeling of being watched pressed closer. The lantern's pale glow barely reached the edges of the trail. Each step forward seemed to stretch the space around me, lengthening the silence. The forest exhaled softly, mist curling higher with each measured breath. I paused, listening. Even the faintest whisper of leaves was gone. I could hear my heartbeat, slow and uneven, a soft rhythm in the emptiness. The fog shifted around the trees, forming shapes that hinted at presence, then vanished. Every instinct told me to move, to leave, yet the trail drew me forward with quiet insistence. It was as if the forest itself guided me, aware of each step, of each hesitation. I moved slowly, careful, aware. Shadows stretched toward me, then recoiled when I focused directly. The emptiness of the trail pressed in, both inviting and isolating, patient and deliberate. The fog swirled at my feet, curling around boots, brushing ankles, reminded me I was not alone. Yet the silence remained, thick and suffocating, aware of every sound, every movement. I walked on, step by careful step, the trail stretching endlessly, empty yet alive. And I knew that the forest watched, always patient, always waiting, even when no one or nothing was in sight. The trail opened to a rocky clearing, fog curling low over boulders and roots. A massive shadow stretched across one stone, long and dark, though the source was unclear. It did not move like a person, nor like an animal. It reacted to nothing, yet it moved with intention. I stepped closer, boots crunching softly against wet earth. The lantern's pale glow trembled, reflecting faintly off the stone's slick surface. The shadow shifted slightly, stretching, twisting, as though aware of my presence. The air smelled of damp stone and cold metal, faintly earthy, pressing against my skin. Every step made the shadow respond, inching along the rock as though it had life of its own. I held my breath, careful, deliberate, listening to the faint hum that seemed to pulse through the clearing. Branches reached in from the edges of the fog, brushing my arms and face. The shadow remained patient, unmoving yet alive in ways that unsettled every nerve. I blinked. It stretched. I breathed. It pulsed. A soft rustle came from behind the boulder. I spun. Nothing. Only fog curling around trees, bending like water, leaving the shadow intact. I crouched closer, lantern shaking slightly in my hands. The shadow reacted again, stretching along the contours of the rock, deliberate and slow. It seemed to measure me, waiting for me to understand, or to retreat. The fog thickened, curling higher into the clearing. The forest held its breath, silent but aware, watching the exchange between shadow and light. I could feel the pulse beneath my feet, faint, synchronized with the subtle movements of the darkness. I exhaled slowly, stepping back. The shadow remained, patient and unyielding, stretching across the rock, indifferent to my retreat yet attentive. I moved forward cautiously, each step measured, aware of the gaze that lingered behind me. The clearing faded into fog. The shadow clung to the rock, and I walked on, knowing it waited, patient, deliberate, always aware of my passing. The trail narrowed, fog curling thick around the trunks of towering trees. Every branch, every root seemed alive, twitching, bending, watching. The forest breathed softly, patient, deliberate, aware of my presence. Animals froze as I passed. Their eyes followed me, bright and unblinking, reflecting the pale lantern light, too still to be natural. Even the wind seemed hushed, reluctant to stir. I stepped forward slowly, each footfall soft, measured. The fog pressed higher around my ankles, curling into the forest floor like fingers. Shadows stretched, twisting unnaturally along the trail, bending with intent. The air smelled of wet pine, damp earth, faintly metallic. It clung to my skin, pressing against my lungs as I breathed. Every step felt observed, catalogued, as if the forest remembered each movement. I paused. A branch twitched just beyond the lantern's glow. I could hear faint rustling, soft footsteps, deliberate yet unseen. Something moved just at the edge of perception, patient, waiting. The fog swirled, reshaping the trail with each breath I took. Familiar landmarks disappeared. Trees leaned subtly closer, bending with intent. The forest seemed alive, sentient, and I felt like a trespasser in its quiet domain. Shadows pulled at the edges, curling into shapes I could not name. I exhaled slowly, tasting dampness, metallic tang, and the lingering breath of the forest itself. The trail stretched onward, uncertain, yet I felt it guide me forward gently, insistently. Every nerve in my body was alert. Branches brushed my arms, leaves rustled in unnatural patterns. Fog shifted deliberately around me. It was as if the forest itself was aware of every thought, every hesitation. I walked on, step by careful step, the fog thickening, the shadows lengthening, knowing that everything around me watched, patient, deliberate, always waiting, and I could never escape their gaze. The trail shifted, fog curling thickly around the trunks and roots. Then I saw it, a door, old, carved, impossibly precise, standing mid-trail where nothing had been before. No frame, no wall, just the door itself, pale and worn, waiting. I stepped closer, boots soft against the damp earth. The air smelled faintly of old wood and moss, with metallic tang lingering beneath. Fog wrapped around me, curling at my ankles, brushing my knees. I reached for the handle. Cold, solid, real. The door opened easily, revealing nothing I could comprehend. Inside was vastness, impossibly deep, stretching beyond sight, swallowing light and sound alike. I leaned closer, lantern held high. Shadows twisted at the edges of the opening, bending unnaturally, stretching toward the doorway, then receding. The fog around me pressed inward, curious, patient. The air inside smelled of damp stone, earth, and something ancient. A faint hum vibrated through the threshold, threading into my chest. The space pulsed quietly, deliberately, aware of my presence. I dared to step closer. The trail behind me seemed to vanish into fog. Trees leaned subtly, bending inwards, as if to guide or warn. I glanced back. The door remained impossibly still, impossibly patient. I felt its gaze, though it had no eyes, and understood it knew me, recognized me, waited. I whispered a name, almost involuntarily. The vastness beyond seemed to pulse in response. Faint ripples in space that brushed my mind. I stepped back, heart steadying, careful, aware. The door remained, a sentinel mid-trail, silent, patient, impossible, and I walked on, knowing it would wait forever, a gateway to something vast and unknowable, and I could not forget it. The trail opened into a clearing. Fog rolled low, curling around roots and stones like soft fingers. A campfire burned ahead, cold and blue, its flame unnatural, almost alive. Figures gathered silently around it. They did not move, did not speak. Their eyes seemed fixed, watching, patient, knowing. I stepped closer, boots pressing softly into damp earth. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and something metallic. Acrid beneath the smokeless fire. Fog wrapped around my ankles, coiling upward, brushing my knees. The flames danced without heat, shadows stretching unnaturally, bending toward the watchers, then recoiling. I felt their presence on my back, patient and deliberate, a weight I could not name. I whispered, barely audible, but the fog swallowed the sound immediately. The figures remained, still and silent, observing with quiet insistence. Every rustle, every movement of leaves seemed amplified, deliberate, measured. I knelt slightly, careful not to disturb the circle. The fire's blue glow illuminated pale faces, expressionless, timeless. The clearing pulsed with quiet awareness, shadows bending, fog swirling around them. A soft creak, like a branch yielding under invisible weight, echoed through the mist. I froze. Nothing moved, yet I felt the figures follow my gaze, attentive, patient. The cold air pressed against my skin, brushing along my neck and arms. I could feel the pulse of the forest, synchronized with the faint rhythm of the fire, the watchers, the fog. Every sense heightened, aware, alert. I exhaled slowly. The figures remained, blue flames reflecting off still eyes, the clearing suspended in quiet tension, and I rose, moving carefully, step by measured step. The trail stretched forward, fog curling in my wake. The last campfire lingered in memory. The figures watching, patient, silent, and I walked on, aware that some presence followed. Even beyond the reach of sight, the trail dissolved completely into fog. Each step sank softly into wet earth, indistinct, erased by the mist curling at my ankles. The forest around me felt vast and alive, breathing, patient, watching. I could no longer see where I had been, or where I was going. Trees twisted into shapes that were familiar, then alien, bending subtly, leaning in to observe. The fog swirled, curling around roots, rocks, and me, soft but deliberate. The air smelled damp and earthy, with faint hints of pine and cold stone. It pressed into my chest, curling along my arms, brushing my neck. Every breath I drew carried the forest into me, threading into my mind. I moved forward slowly, careful, aware. Shadows stretched and recoiled, bending with intent, twisting in ways that defied reason. The fog thickened at every turn, swallowing the trail behind me, erasing it completely. I realized that the forest had not been following me. It had been waiting, guiding me, shaping the path in silence, patient, deliberate. I was both lost and home, caught between the known and the impossible, the living and the unseen. A soft hum threaded through the mist, vibrating underfoot, brushing my spine. Branches brushed against my face, needles trembling softly, leaves whispering in patterns I could almost understand. It was quiet yet alive, calm yet filled with awareness. I paused. The fog thickened around me, dense and unyielding, yet comforting in its own strange way. I felt a presence near, patient, gentle, not threatening but undeniable. I understood then that I would never truly leave. Step by step, I moved through the mist. The trail no longer mattered. The path no longer existed. The forest had become both home and boundary, a place of quiet acceptance, where shadows and whispers lingered, patient, eternal. I exhaled slowly, letting the fog curl around me, feel through me, guide me, relief and sorrow intertwined, soft and quiet, threading through my chest. The mist wrapped me in its embrace, and I walked forward, neither lost nor found, forever part of the forest, part of the fog, part of the endless, patient silence.